Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz was born on August 13, 1926, near Buran, a small village in Cuba. This village, nestled in the lush Cuban countryside, was a place where the rhythms of rural life were deeply felt. The landscape was dotted with sugarcane fields and small homes, painting a picture of a simpler time. His dad, Angel Castro y Arguez, owned a big sugar plantation and was pretty wealthy. Angel was a self-made man who had built his fortune through hard work and determination. His success in the sugar industry made him one of the prominent figures in the region. Angel came to Cuba from Spain. Like many immigrants of his time, he sought better opportunities and a new life in the Caribbean. His journey from Spain to Cuba was one of ambition and hope, reflecting the broader story of many who migrated to the island. Fidel's mom, Lina Ruz Gonzalez, worked as a maid in Angel's house. She was a woman of humble origins whose life was marked by hard work and resilience. Her role in the household was significant, and she later became a central figure in Fidel's life. Fidel had a bunch of brothers and sisters: Raul, Ramon, Angela, Emma, and Agustina. Growing up in a large family, Fidel experienced the dynamics of sibling relationships and the strong bonds that formed among them. These relationships would play a crucial role in his later life. The Castro family had lots of money thanks to their dad's sugarcane business. Their wealth afforded them a comfortable lifestyle with access to education and other privileges that were not common for many Cubans at the time. But even though they were well off, Fidel saw a big difference between his dad's wealth and his mom's more humble beginnings. This contrast left a lasting impression on him, shaping his views on social justice and inequality from a young age. Even though he grew up in the countryside, Fidel got a good education. His parents valued learning and ensured that he attended school, where he showed a keen interest in reading and knowledge. He went to a strict boarding school run by Jesuits where he learned about religion and discipline. The Jesuit education system was rigorous, instilling in him a sense of discipline and a strong moral foundation. Later he went to Havana for college, and in 1945 he started studying law at the University of Havana. This move to the capital was a significant step in his life, exposing him to a broader world of ideas and intellectual debates. This was a big moment for Fidel, because the university introduced him to new ideas and politics that changed how he saw the world. It was here that he began to develop his revolutionary ideas, influenced by the political climate and the vibrant student movements of the time. The University of Havana in the 1940s was a bustling hub for political activity. Students from all walks of life gathered here, driven by a shared desire for change and a better future for Cuba. Among these students was Fidel Castro, a young man who was not only charismatic and intelligent, but also deeply passionate about social justice. He quickly immersed himself in the political scene. Fidel joined various student groups and became an active participant in protests against the widespread corruption and social injustices that plagued Cuba at the time. His involvement in these movements was driven by a profound sense of duty to his fellow countrymen. His passion for his beliefs was evident in his fiery speeches and relentless activism. However, his fervor sometimes led him to act impulsively, driven by the urgency of his convictions. In 1947, Fidel took a bold step by joining a group of students who aimed to overthrow the Dominican Republic's dictator, Rafael Trujillo. This daring venture, although unsuccessful, was a testament to his growing resolve. The failure of this mission only strengthened his determination. Fidel became even more committed to the cause of revolution and social change, realizing that the path to justice was fraught with challenges. In 1948, Fidel found himself amidst the chaos of the Bogotá riots in Colombia. These riots erupted during a major international conference, highlighting the widespread political unrest in Latin America. These tumultuous events underscored the instability that plagued the region, and reinforced Fidel's belief that powerful nations should not impose their will on smaller countries. He saw firsthand the devastating effects of foreign influence. Throughout his time at the University of Havana, Fidel honed his skills in public speaking. His ability to articulate his vision and rally support made him a formidable leader among his peers. Fidel's outspoken criticism of the Cuban government grew louder. He condemned the regime for its corruption and its subservience to foreign powers, calling for a new era of independence and self-determination for Cuba. By the early 1950s, Fulgencio Batista, a military dictator, was in charge of Cuba. Batista had initially come to power in the 1930s, but it was his return to power in 1952 through a military coup that solidified his control over the island nation. He had taken power by force, overthrowing the existing government and canceling the upcoming elections. This move was met with widespread discontent among the Cuban populace. Batista was known for being cruel, corrupt and friendly with the United States, which many Cubans felt was taking advantage of their country. American businesses had significant control over Cuban resources, and this economic dominance only fueled the resentment among the Cuban people. Fidel, now a lawyer, saw how Batista treated the Cuban people. He witnessed the widespread poverty, the lack of political freedom, and the brutal repression of any opposition. These injustices deeply affected him. He decided to do something about it. Fidel began to speak out against Batista's regime, gaining the attention and support of many who were also dissatisfied with the current state of affairs. He and a group of revolutionaries, including his brother Raúl and a doctor from Argentina named Ernesto Che Guevara, planned an attack on the Moncada barracks on July 26, 1953. This attack was intended to spark a larger uprising against Batista's government. The attack failed, resulting in many deaths and the capture of Fidel and his comrades. However, it was a powerful message that started the Cuban Revolution. Fidel used his trial as a platform to denounce Batista's regime, famously declaring, "History will absolve me." After the attack, Fidel had to hide in Mexico. He was released from prison in 1955 under an amnesty deal and immediately went into exile to continue his revolutionary activities. He didn't give up, though. In Mexico, Fidel met other exiled revolutionaries and continued to plan the overthrow of Batista. He was determined to return to Cuba and lead a successful revolution. He started a group called the 26th of July Movement, named after the day of the attack, and teamed up with other groups who wanted Batista out. This movement became the core of the revolutionary effort against Batista's regime. In 1956, Fidel, Che Guevara, and 81 other revolutionaries sailed from Mexico to Cuba in a small crowded boat called the Granma. The journey was perilous, and the boat was overloaded, but their determination was unwavering. They wanted to start a rebellion against Batista. Upon landing, they faced immediate attacks from Batista's forces, but those who survived regrouped in the Sierra Maestra Mountains, where they began their guerrilla warfare campaign that would eventually lead to the overthrow of Batista's regime. The Granma arrived in Cuba in December 1956, but it was a difficult trip. Batista's army attacked them right away, and Fidel's group had to escape into the mountains. Things were tough at first, but Fidel's group, known as the guerrillas, were brave and determined. They also started getting help from local farmers. Fidel was a great speaker, and his speeches on the radio inspired many Cubans who were tired of Batista. He promised fairness, land for the people, and an end to corruption. As the rebels got stronger, Batista got weaker. On January 1, 1959, Batista ran away from Cuba, and Fidel Castro and his revolutionaries marched into Havana. The Cuban Revolution had won. Fidel Castro, only 32 years old, became the leader of Cuba. His victory surprised everyone in Latin America and around the world. Fidel Castro quickly started changing Cuba. He took control of businesses owned by other countries, especially American sugar companies, because he thought they were hurting Cuba. This made the United States mad and caused problems between the two countries. Castro made big changes to help people. Education and healthcare became free for everyone. No one had to be illiterate anymore. Healthcare, which used to be only for rich people, became a right for all. Doctors and nurses went to faraway villages to help even the poorest Cubans. Castro also took land from rich owners and gave it to farmers. This was a major promise of the revolution, and it was meant to make things fairer for everyone. These programs, even though they weren't perfect, made life better for millions of Cubans. Even with the good changes, Castro's government became very strict. People who disagreed with him were punished. Newspapers and radio stations that weren't controlled by the government were shut down, and people couldn't speak freely. Thousands of Cubans who didn't like Castro were put in jail or had to leave the country. Cuba became friends with the Soviet Union, especially after the United States tried to invade Cuba at the Bay of Pigs in 1961. This made things even worse between Cuba and the U.S. It led to the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, when the Soviet Union put nuclear missiles in Cuba, and the world almost had a nuclear war. People who liked Castro said these strict rules were necessary to protect the revolution, but others said it was wrong and that Castro was a dictator. Fidel Castro ruled Cuba for almost 50 years. But as he got older, he became sick. In 2006, he gave control to his brother Raúl Castro, who had been part of the revolution from the beginning. Fidel got sicker, and in 2008 he officially retired as president. Even after he retired, people in Cuba still saw him as an important leader. He sometimes wrote articles and spoke in public about what was happening in the world. Fidel Castro died on November 25, 2016, at the age of 90. It was the end of a big chapter in history, not just for Cuba, but for Latin America and the world. Castro's enduring impact. Fidel Castro's legacy is complicated. He did some good things and some bad things. Many people admire him for improving education and healthcare, standing up to the United States and protecting Cuba's independence. But he also punished people who disagreed with him, made some bad decisions about the economy, and didn't allow people many freedoms. Some people think he's a hero, and others think he's a dictator. His impact on Cuba and the world is clear. He was a very important person who changed the 20th century. It's hard to decide if Fidel Castro was good or bad. He did good things like improve education and healthcare, but he also took away people's freedoms. He reminds us that revolutions are complicated, power can be dangerous, and fighting for fairness is important. Some people focus on the good things he did, while others focus on the bad things. People will probably always argue about Fidel Castro. He's an example of what can happen when someone has too much power, even if they start with good intentions. But his fight for fairness and his ability to inspire people will always be remembered.